Hello! Hi, ladies and gentlemen of the wonderful YouTube realm. What is going on today? Hope you're doing well. My name is IcyVolk as always, and we are back, finally back for some more WildStar Online. And this time we've actually got some pretty interesting information on the Warrior, which is one of the 6 classes for the MMO. And you're probably wondering to yourself, Icy, why are we going to talk about a class that we already know of? And that's been announced about a few months back. Are you gonna like rehash all of the... No. Hold your horses, people. That's not the case here. Because, I'll tell you why, Carbine Studios is actually re-revealing each of the classes, including the 2 classes that we don't know of yet. So, with the Warrior, what they did is... they gave us way more info than what we knew. So that's what we knew, like, before the re-reveal. Like, this tiny bit represents what we know about the Warrior currently. But then, Carbine gave us, like, this amount of info through Reddit, their official website, and their Twitch stream. So, all those resources gave us way more information on the Warrior's mechanics and how the Warrior works and what its builds are, what it focuses on doing. So today in this video we're going to focus on going through all these things, and we are going to break down every single thing about the Warrior. I'm probably going to miss a few things, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to talk about most of what was revealed for the Warrior. Okay, so here's everything that we've learned about the Warrior so far throughout this whole week of reveal. So, first of all, the following races of the game are compatible with the class. On the Exile side, we have the Human, the Granok, and the Mordesh. For the Dominion side, we have the Cassian, the Draken, and the Makari. Moving on, the resource type used for combat is called Kinetic Energy, which basically works like Rage from World of Warcraft for the Warrior. So you generate it by using normal attacks, and you use it to unleash those powerful and hard-hitting attacks on the mobs that you want to annihilate. And it also decays in and out of combat. So Kinetic Energy used to be characterized by 3 cells, by 3 individual orbs, and that is actually shown on the official Warrior class page. And that's not the case anymore because the developers have changed that up into a single bar. So now Kinetic Energy is represented as a single bar. And the reason that they changed it is because, according to Hugh Shelton, the class lead developer of the game, the cells were slowing up the Warrior's combat speed, and they wanted to let the Warrior do continuous amounts of damage without having any resource to annihilate the enemies. So they turned the cells into the single bar. Now, the Warrior is also a heavy armor user, meaning that it will be able to mitigate more damage and to take on more enemies at the same time. The roles that can be performed by the Warrior are either DPS or tank, and the DPS style, the DPS playstyle is called Assault. Warriors also use 2 weapons, not 1, but 2. And the first weapon that they use is called the Power Sword, which is a nuclear plasma-infused sword. It's actually a replaceable weapon, so it takes up a gear slot on your character sheet. The second weapon, however, is a standard weapon. It's a passive weapon that comes with your character. It's called the Arm Cannon, the XL45 Hell-Mitten. So you use the Arm Cannon for mainly, you know, things like CC, for crowd control. And I honestly think that if the Arm Cannon was non-existent, that it wouldn't make much of a difference. So I guess it's just there for, like, you know, to fit the sci-fi vibe. So they could have just added in the abilities to the Warrior without having to implement, like, a visual weapon for the Warrior. But I mean, I guess that's fine with me. Arm cannons are cool looking. And along with those 2 weapons, we have physical abilities, which are also used for CC. So we have moves like Kick and Wallop, which knock down enemies or stun them or apply, like, you know, weaknesses to them, something like that along those lines. And it seems as though the arm cannon has other functionalities other than for combat. So I believe it can be also used for watering down plants or as a GPS. I mean, that's my assumption from watching the devs speak, but it might be wrong. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Moving on. The warrior class has 2 stances. All classes, according to the class developer, all classes have stances which give them offensive perks or defensive ones. And for the warrior, we have 2 stances. The first one is called Juggernaut, which is the offensive side, and we have Bulwark, which is the defensive stance. Triggering Juggernaut will unleash Overdrive, which is a passive ability, a short-term buff, which stops kinetic energy from decaying and basically resets a ton of cooldown-based abilities. So it also allows the player to use abilities that use kinetic energy for free, entirely for free, for a short amount of time. And on top of that, it increases damage by just a tiny little bit. Now, warriors will also be able to hold their own in AoE situations, since, you know, they wear heavy armor and have more powerful defensive abilities, and the stance called Bulwark, making them nearly invulnerable to, like, big groups of mobs. So, you know, they take a lot of damage instead of dodging like the Stalker does. And they can easily devastate armies by using the AoE ability called Whirlwind, which is, you know, kind of like the same for the World of Warcraft ability Whirlwind. So you use that to, you know, kill enemies, a lot of enemies at the same time. It's not like that powerful, but it's pretty darn powerful, just saying. And warriors can be tuned to play as either a pure tank, pure DPS, or a hybrid of the 2 roles. Players can tune these roles by utilizing the AMP system, which is somewhat complicated, but it allows the players to add points to the skills and the abilities that they want to use. So that'll, you know, make the customization for the character much more interesting. Players wanted to make their character, you know, have specific roles and not just like, oh, I can DPS or tank. No, maybe I can do both of these things. Maybe I can tune my player in a way that I can do a lot of various things at the same time, or, you know, we get a lot of customization here, basically. Most warrior crowd control abilities work on locking people down with effects such as snares, tethers, and knockdowns. So now we're going to talk about the melee DPS side of the warrior, which is called Assault. So players with the Assault playstyle, players can customize the playstyle to play as a melee-oriented fighter, or a mix of melee and range, or mostly ranged. However, if you do choose to pick as a range-focused Assault warrior, then you'll find that, you know, the Esper and the Spellslinger will outrange this playstyle by far. So you might not want to do that and maybe just stick with the melee side or the melee ranged mix instead of just mostly ranged, because, you know, obviously you'll do more damage using the first 2 playstyles. At least that's what I think. Here, I'm going to list some of the abilities that have been announced for the warrior and that were also shown in the live stream. First of all, we have Kick, which is a melee cone knockdown ability. It hits up to 3 targets, and it synergizes well greatly with Savage Strikes, which deals double damage to knock down enemies. So that's great. Moving on, we have Plasma Whip, which is a ranged pull ability. It is a good ability for initiates, good for boss and mop pulls, and certain PvP situations against ranged enemy players. So if you see like a Spellslinger or an Esper who's trying to kite you, then you can easily use that ability to pull them to you and knock them down to the ground, you know. Moving on, we have Tether, which is a ranged skill shot ability, which hits one single enemy, to anchor them to their current position, preventing them from moving more than 10 meters away from the tether unless it gets destroyed. So that's also a good ability for fighting ranged mobs or enemy players, because that means that you can move towards them and they can't escape the tether. So that's a plus. We have Flashbang, which is basically a blind ability. We have Leap, which is, basically what it means. You leap towards a target, and that's actually, the Leap ability is also an upgradable ability, meaning that if you add in points to abilities using the tier system, which is completely new, you can make the ability better by, making it a double leap. So you can jump around enemies a few times, maybe 2 times or more, I don't know. But a lot of abilities in WildStar are upgradable using the tier system. So you can choose which abilities you want to upgrade. So again, we have more customization for building your character. So you have a lot of choices as to what you want to do specifically in combat, and how you want to move, and how you want to fight enemies, right? So this is a great example. So you can make Leap a double leap by using the tier system. Moving on, we have Savage Strikes, which is a double physical attack ability. Synergizes well with Kick, as I first mentioned it. We have Power Strike, which deals X amount of damage to up to 3 foes and reduces the global cooldown on the next Power Strike. So that means that it'll be progressively hitting faster if you keep using the same ability. It uses Kinetic Energy. This ability is actually kind of awesome, because it means that if you keep repeatedly using it, that it'll progressively be faster. And yeah, I'm just repeating myself at this point, but I don't know, I just found that ability particularly interesting, and they actually explained it in great detail in during the live stream. Moving on, we also have Plasma Saw, a few abilities that were not actually detailed, they're just mentioned or seen. We have Plasma Saw, Tremor Strike, Breaching Strike, and Expulsion. Also, according to the developers, the Warrior has a few healing abilities which sacrifice the shield instead of the player's health. And one of the abilities is called Urgent Reserves, which regenerates the shield and grants limited protection to the player from crowd control. So this ability doesn't actually sacrifice the shield, but it's one of those awesome healing abilities available for the Warrior class. Now these are all... Oh, and I've missed one ability. It's called Unstoppable Force. This ability breaks the Warrior free from all CC effects and also grants immunity to CC for about, I don't know how many seconds. The ability also has a long cooldown, I think. That's what I think. Yeah. So let's talk about the tank class, the tank side of the Warrior now. Now, tanking works pretty much the same like in other MMOs. As a tank, your job is to mitigate damage and to focus on generating threat on the boss so that the boss won't hit your allies, but you instead, who can take way more damage than your other allies, obviously. Warriors, in this case, will have tank-specific stats called Deflect and Critical Deflect. Taunting is aim-based, and not entirely, I think, but mostly aim-based. So skill shot taunts, and point-blank area of effect taunts are available in the game. So you'll have to think a lot about positioning, smart positioning, and hitting your taunts well. So you have to make sure that you actually hit the boss with your taunts, and you can do so by hovering your telegraph over the mob that you're trying to kill. Warriors generate threat with basic attacks, which are mostly non-cooldown based, with a primal attack, which also doesn't have a cooldown but uses up kinetic energy, and a mix of CC abilities. Warriors also have Intimidates, which are way stronger taunts. They have really long cooldowns, but with Intimidates, you lose your position on the threat list immediately. So when the Intimidate wears off, you're not at the top of the list. So you have to keep using your normal taunts right after you use up the Intimidate. With taunts, obviously, you retain your possession, your position, and lose it progressively if you don't keep using it. I mean, the taunts. Jesus, can't talk. Taunts also reduce damage dealt by enemies to all players, but not the taunter. So I found that interesting. I think that's a new feature of the game, or at least for this MMO. I haven't seen this in any other MMO, so I'm kind of interested in seeing how that will help in raids. I mean, obviously it will help a lot, but I wonder how often people will be using taunts in this game. This functionality also works in PvP, which, oh my god, that like blew my mind, because it means that the PvP will be more like dynamic and complicated. So it encourages strategic play. We also we have been told, what am I trying to say? No, what I'm trying to say is we also had a few tanking abilities, you know, told to us. We have a few here. First one is Defense Grid, which is a long cooldown ability that puts a protective zone over the user and the players that are in it. And it basically grants them something. Now, basically, if people stand in the defense grid, they take less damage. So this is a particularly good ability for unavoidable attacks. Moving on, we have Plasma Wall, which grants a defensive buff to allies who are standing closely behind the warrior. And, you know, it's also good for positioning. If people are not standing where they're supposed to be, then the warrior can just pop that up, protect the foolish players, and yeah, it's a good one. Then we have Sentinel, which is a targeted passive ability which sacrifices some of the warrior's armor to give it to an ally. So it's good for off-tank builds that are less focused on pure mitigation. So maybe you want to use it for switching off between another tank. We also have Polarity Fields, which is a tank-based ability. It's a damn it. It's a long range, cannon ability. It hits an enemy with a polarity field, which damages nearby enemies. So typically tanks are slower in PvE. For questing, they're not ideal, but they have a lot of abilities that make up for their slow burst damage. So like polarity fields, which is a DOT ability, damages enemies over time, so it's a really good one. But in PvE, tanks are also good because they can take bigger groups of enemies, but they also take a longer time to take them down, you know. So ideally, you'd want to use the assault side to level up, for leveling up. So in short, warriors can mitigate a ton of damage and even heal their own shields. Stalkers, however, you know, are able to avoid so much damage that it makes them fairly even to tanks. A lot of other tank classes are, you know, match up to the warrior skill, but they're just played differently in terms of playstyle. Warriors, though, will probably be considered as the best tank in almost any situation, in any kind of encounter. So yeah, warrior tanks are probably the best out there, but like, you know, tank stalkers, for instance, are also good, but they're just played differently. They dodge a lot of attacks, but they might not be ideal for, you know, any kind of raiding situation. Also, warrior tanks are very much viable in PvP. They're not fundamental for a raid composition, but, you know, I'm going to repeat myself and say this again. They're ideal because they can deal with any kind of situation. So that was it. That was all of the information that I have retrieved for the warrior for this week of the re-reveal. So next week we're going to talk about the Esper or the Spellslinger, I believe. Not sure which one of these two we're going to talk about, but this was pretty much the warrior. And if you'd like to know more, even more about the warrior, then I really suggest you watch the live stream, you read the AMA, read the official class page, and maybe do a little bit of research. Maybe find some information that you haven't seen before, you know. But that's the warrior class, and I'm actually really interested in trying it out. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this recap, this overview of the class, and make sure to stay tuned for next week. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time, folks. Goodbye.